I've really been trying to facilitate a conversation around a shift in the valuation metric from price per square foot to value per square foot. And in order to do that, we really have to take the onus off of builders to solve for affordability challenges in the market, regardless of where they kind of build in terms of price points or geographies. Because what we don't want is sustainability, energy efficiency, electrification, solar plus storage tied to their cost per square foot. And rather have all of those things integrated into enhanced value for home buyers. And you've really come up with a solution that is unique in addressing that very thing from a mortgage and a lending standpoint. So first, Don, can you talk about the philosophy that drove you to create Lowtility, and then maybe just talk a little bit about what Lowtility is?
And I'm going to answer that probably by telling a story. And that story is actually my next door neighbor. She knew I was in the mortgage, she knew I was in the residential space, and she knew I kind of shared this passion for renewable energy. And so she had added solar to her house. And again, this is years ago. This is about 7, 8 years ago. And so it's kind of very early in the phase of renewable energy and renewable energy financing. But we were out, across the fence being neighbors, and she said, "Hey, Don, can you help me out? I'm really worried about this." And she's like, "If something doesn't change, I might not be able to keep my house. I might have to make a change." And what had happened is the person that had knocked on her door and the financing that was promised versus what she got at the time was very, very different. But what it enabled me to do is really, it was this motivation because it was somebody that I cared about to really kind of get up and look under the hood. And so when I got up and I looked under the hood, I was like, wait a second, there's some not great things here. But at the same time, as far as things that weren't great, and when I say not great, at the time there was prepayment penalties for her solar financing, there was adders, it was tax credits, there was all these different things. Her payment, what she thought was going to go to X was Y, and a lot of those things have been solved, but really what it opened my eyes to was the bigger problem and the bigger opportunity. And so that journey that kind of like piqued my curiosity, the bank that I work for, we service a lot of our mortgage loans. So as homeowners make their payments to us, I started kind of diving into some of that servicing data. And I looked at, hey, home ownership is more than a principal and interest. Most the times when we buy a house, we think about what's my mortgage payment, what's my interest rate. And when we stepped back and we looked at loan performance and said, wait a second, utility costs, we're always going to make some sort of utility payment when we own a home. Why don't banks consider utility payments in there? And, so we kind of uncovered that and started looking at it. We looked at loan performance. We looked at home affordability, right? And we looked at, are we putting, generally speaking, we want to do what's right for the homeowner. The more we help the homeowner, the better business practice it is. We're plan to be in business for a long time. So at the core, it's how do we take care of that? So as we looked under the hood, it caused us to kind of just reevaluate housing, affordability, budgets, what are we considering and what are we not considering? And that's kind of where we created a product. We call it Lowtility, is kind of our white label name for our product. And it's very simple because a bunch of bankers put it together. And it's basically, we looked at it, if there's improvements that will lower utility costs, Lowtility, if it'll lower utility costs, why not include those into their mortgage? We're already doing the due diligence on if a homeowner or a home buyer can make their payment. And what we wanted to avoid, we saw a percentage of homeowners that would buy a house or move into a house. And then once they got into a house, they would add renewable energy financing on top of it. And a lot of that came with liens and loans and things like that. And at the time, a lot of those were kind of borderline predatory, in my opinion, with some of the adders and things that they did. So for us, we just said, hey, let's look at it. Let's reevaluate it. We created a new product where for us and an affordability, let's take into consideration utility payments and let's give a homeowner not just the money to buy the house, but let's give the homeowner the money to electrify a house or to reduce their utility payments. And when we look at mortgage payments instead of PITI, but PITI plus utility payments, we realize there's a whole bunch of buying power that is sitting there. There's a bunch of opportunity. So kind of said a different way, Sarah, if a homeowner were to think of their utility payment, whether that's electricity, whether that's gas and electricity, if they were to think of their utility payment as if it was a loan payment, how much money would that be? And so, like today, if you take a $300 utility payment, that's the equivalent of like $50,000 of buying power. And so, what our loan product is that we created is we turn the utility payment into buying power, and then we let the homeowner buy a house and use that money to make it more energy efficient. And what we find is there's perception and reality. The perception is sustainability is more expensive. And what people don't realize is we unlock that buying power to electrify a house, to make it more sustainable, has been sitting there underneath all of our noses this whole entire time. But now we're trying to change that narrative that sustainability should equal affordability. It shouldn't, that perception that, hey, an energy efficient house should be a more expensive house is completely a false narrative. So a little bit of a ramble there on different things, but that's a little bit of the story of how I got there, what we uncovered, and what it led to from an opportunity perspective.
So let's go back to this concept of buying power. Can you walk us through the math about how, kind of how Lowtility unlocks this buying power and what that does enable the home buyer to afford? And then also, can you talk about benefits for builders and how builders can use this unlocked buying power to drive sales and maximize ROI and actually boost their profits?
Your utility payments, and again, when I say utility, gas or electric, right? If you didn't have to make that utility payment, right, and you turn that into a loan payment, what money would that free up? And so that I'm going to use $300 as an example. It's a pretty round number. It's a lot of markets. That's what it is. So a home buyer, and I'm going to use some round numbers here. A home buyer, let's pretend they had a $1,000 mortgage payment and a $300 utility payment. Well, when you add those two together, they're living in that house. Their cost to live in that house is $1,300, mortgage payment plus utility payments. So what we basically did is said, well, what if they didn't have to make a utility payment? And what if we just combined that $300 utility payment into their mortgage payment? How much more buying power? So by increasing that monthly, taking that utility payment and putting it into their mortgage, we're able to loan that person with a $300 utility payment an extra $50, almost $55,000. So if you were to look at a homeowner, they both are paying the exact same amount of money. The homeowner that's paying $1,300 and $300 of that is going to the utility company would only be able to borrow about $55,000 less. The person who includes it into it uses that buying power, is able to basically borrow an extra $55,000, and they would both have the exact same monthly payment. So then the question becomes, okay, if I can get an extra $55,000 for the exact same monthly payment, what are the features that I would add to my house? If somebody gave you, look, I'm not going to increase your monthly payment, but I'm going to give you an extra 50 grand, what improvements would you make? And from a builder's perspective, what we're seeing is a lot of these builders are going, wait a second, you mean for the exact same monthly payment, a home buyer can get $50,000 worth of equipment and the builder doesn't have to pay for it, right? And it doesn't increase the homeowner's monthly cost. So what we're seeing from a homeowner's perspective, imagine you have the exact same house, right? One house came with was 100% electrified, but yet they both have the exact same monthly payment. We're seeing a lot of home buyers are gravitating, they're future-proofing their house. We're seeing them, they're basically like, wow, I can be an energy efficient, 100% electric for the exact same monthly cost. And so that's where we're seeing home builders use it as kind of the honey to differentiate themselves, to attract home buyers to their houses, because they're providing more value. We talked about in the beginning, you mentioned value per square foot. And really what you're talking about is most home buyers are asking, hey, what's my monthly payment, right? how much money out of pocket do I have to come up with to buy a house? But more so, what do I get, that value? What do I get for that payment? And so that's where I think we 10x the value component for a home buyer or a builder or a homeowner is the money that's going to a utility company right now. There's a lot of inefficiencies. There's a lot of waste. So what this does is it empowers a home buyer in every market. Today, they should be shopping how they power their home. Should I, a builder should give the homeowner the opportunity. Should you buy your power from a power company? Should you rent it from a finance company that has solar panels on your roof? Or should you just own the equipment on the house? Should you turn your house into a own mini virtual power plant? There's all sorts of things we can do, right? So that value of how do we help a homeowner maximize their housing budget is kind of where we try to find that value. There's a lot of wasted money trapped inside of utility companies that can be used to electrify a house, if that makes sense.
Sure. And I think that, Lowtility's flexibility by installing improvements after closing through escrow holdbacks really makes it easier for homeowners to adopt new technologies on their own terms. You're not necessarily dictating specific upgrades, but you're empowering those home buyers to, make decisions that are best for themselves.
You're exactly right. One market, a Washington is different than an Arizona, is different than a Florida, So home buyers, you said it perfectly, Sarah, in that, hey, we're going to unlock this buying power. What do you want to do with it? How do you want to spend it? What can we do to help you have a more energy efficient, sustainable house? And we give that opportunity to home buyers or builders to help create opportunities for homeowners.